Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name, Kerry Stevenson, and today, in these times of turmoil, I'm bringing you a company by the name of Agrimin. The ASX code is AMN, M for mother, N for Nelly, because it's kind of hard to understand. AMN is the ASX code. Sulphate of potash. Now, why is that important? Well, I've got Mark Savich here. He's the CEO and the executive director. He's going to talk to us about why sulphate of potash and fertilizers in general are important right now, and what Agrimin are doing to help supply the market. Mark, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps today.
Thanks for having me, Kerry. I look forward to sharing with your listeners the story about Agrimin.
Well, I've done a little bit of research and it is fascinating. So before we get into the detail and the offtakes, because you've been working on this for quite some time, give our listeners, our wonderful community, of an overview of who are Agrimin.
Yes, Agrimin's a resources company based here in Western Australia. We're developing a tier 1 fertiliser asset that'll produce a product called sulphate of potash, and that'll be then supplied to farmers all around the world to help them increase their crop yields for crops such as fruits and vegetables, grapes, tree nuts, all the high value type crops.
And that is really important at the moment because we need more food, and there's talk of food shortages and there's talks of challenges at the moment, and we all know what's going on over in Europe with Russia and the Ukraine. From my understanding, Russia are quite a big supplier, or have been a big supplier of fertilizer throughout the world. Is that impacting the macroeconomics around sulphate of potash, and in fact makes your project quite important?
Absolutely. So Russia and Belarus supply about 40% of world production of potash in general. So there's two types of potash. There's muriate of potash, which is about 90% of global supply. And as I said, 40% from Russia and Belarus. Most of the rest comes from Canada. And then there's a smaller segment of the market, sulphate of potash. It's a higher value type of product, and it's used on the higher value crops like the fruits and vegetables. But in generally, there's all potassium units, so it's all potash. And what we're seeing at the moment with sanctions on Belarus and Russia, we're sort of seeing 40% of global supply being removed in a matter of weeks. So it's had really big impact across the world, to the point where we've had phone calls from Australian farmers and from Australian distributors of fertiliser saying, "Do you have any potash you can give us?" And we're saying, "Well, unfortunately, we're not in production yet, but you can see that it's really filtered all the way through so quickly, and it's quite amazing." And I think the government as well is now starting to realise some of the vulnerabilities in supply chains for critical inputs such as fertilisers and just food in general.
Well, we're going to talk more about the deals that you've been doing and how you've grown this project, but it is the Mackay potash project. It's in WA. You've been working on it for quite some time now. Tell us the milestones that you've hit so far and what's coming up, because I think that's really important from an investor point of view, how far you are from, I guess, a final investment decision and funding.
Yeah, so look, we acquired the Mackay potash project in 2014, and pretty much got the same management team that's been with us all the way through. So it's a really good team of motivated people. So we've gone through the usual steps of developing a resources project. So we did our scoping study, done a pre-feasibility study, completed a definitive feasibility study. We had an independent technical review completed by Gavilon last year. We've just announced that we've got 70% of the production now locked under long-term binding offtake agreements. And we've got a native title agreement in place as well for the project. So it's been a journey of 7 years and about $50 million to get to where we are. And we are just now months away from being shovel ready. And it probably couldn't come at a better time, given that potash prices are sort of hitting record highs, and we're starting to see that the food security thematic is really being talked about a lot more. So it's going to be hopefully make it a bit easier for us to finance our project.
Well, I think that's right. And also, I wonder whether the government are looking at what you're doing and saying, well, actually, this is pretty critical at the moment. Are you getting some support from the government to get this project to shovel-ready positioning?
Yeah, so look, we've been, I think we've had quite a good level of support from the government over a long period of time. So we got granted major project status by the federal government in 2020. We've got the lead agency status granted to the project by the state government over here last year. And just recently we announced that the Tanami Road, which is a really important piece of road infrastructure between Lake Mackay and Wyndham Port, will receive $400 million under the recently announced federal budget. And so that's a huge amount of money to upgrade a road that would be really important to our project. So that's great. We also announced last year that we got a $2 million grant under the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative from the federal government. So yeah, $2 million is not, it all helps, especially at this point in the project's evolution. So yeah, I think the government appreciates the need for big projects such as ours to come online in remote parts of Australia to really build out infrastructure and create jobs. And I think our project's probably best positioned out of many projects in Australia to have long-term, really long-term benefits for local communities.
It's a big project. You talked that you've done the DFS. Can you talk me through the numbers that you did for the DFS and what this project's looking like now, given the fact that it's like everything at the moment, commodity prices are going up. Where is sulphate of potash sitting there in comparison with your DFS when it was done?
Yeah, so we did the DFS. Prices around that time were sort of floating between $500 to $600 a tonne. So the DFS delivered a production rate of 450,000 tonnes of SOP at a total cash cost of $159 US per tonne FOB, and we assumed a price of $500 per tonne, and that delivered a 21% IRR and a $1 billion Aussie, $1 billion NPV. So some really strong metrics there. And that was, as I said, based on a price of $500. Today, the SOP price is over $1,000 a tonne. So I wouldn't speculate what the new NPV and returns would be, but obviously higher than what we did have in the DFS. And so we'll be, as we're moving through the feed work, we'll be updating some of our numbers, but it's obviously moving all the right way for us as we move into financing.
Let's talk about financing, because you said you're coming up to being shovel ready, and ladies and gentlemen, they got the project in 2014. They've done all the hard work and now you can reap the rewards potentially, but do your own research. But when you're looking at the funding, how are you going to do it? How much do you need? Talk us through that final investment decision, what that's looking like and the timing for it.
Yeah, so as I said, hopefully shovel ready by the end of this year, and then really the last milestone would be obviously securing the financing package for the project. The CapEx in the DFS was $640 million Australian, and we've guided that we'll need somewhere between 700 to 800 million once you add in funding during construction and those things. Depending on the funding mix, the exact number that we'll need will be determined, but it's in that range. We'll be looking to secure about 60 to 65% of that via debt, and we're quite in advanced discussions with multiple financiers on the debt side. The equity side, we're now engaging with industry players from around the world, especially some of the largest fertilizer companies, to look at potentially bringing on a partner for our project. And so one of the reasons that we would like to bring on a partner is to limit the amount of equity that we need to take into the project, minimise dilution for existing shareholders. So as you said, make sure that all of our shareholders get maximum exposure to the value that we've created with this asset. But also, now that we've de-risked the project over so many years, and it's really like, all the ducks are lined up, I think we have a great opportunity to show this to some of the biggest fertilizer companies around the world and try and bring in a tier one partner to lower the risk as well once we move into construction and commissioning. So that process of funding and looking at and discussing with industry players is all happening in the background while we're moving through the final environmental permits for the project.
You've just announced a binding agreement to supply your product to the US company Gavilon. I think it's called Gavilon Fertilizer.
Yes. Yeah.
How important was that to the process and moving forward?
Yeah, so look, I guess a few years ago there was a bit of caution or concern. Could we sell 450,000 tonnes of SOP? This will be the second largest producer globally of SOP, and so therefore, those concerns are probably valid. So we've been through a process now of 4 years of talking to the industry and trying to secure the best counterparties we could get for our product and getting a nice mix of customers spread globally around the world to make sure that our offtake book is sort of balanced to where we see consumption around the world. So it's been a big process. Our first offtake we announced last year was with Sinochem, so it's one of the largest SOEs in China. They're the main purchaser of potash for China, and China's still heavily reliant on imports of potash to meet their food needs, right? So that's a really important market. Then outside of China, we signed an offtake earlier this year with Nitron to supply into Africa and into Latin America. And then just recently we signed, yesterday we announced signed our third and final offtake with Gavilon, which is a top 3 fertilizer distributor in the US. And so now we've locked away 70% of our targeted production, which was our target. Our target was to get 70%. We wanted to retain the other 30% to make sure we've got that strategic value retained, some optionality going forward. And I think we've now answered the question that we get asked by people, can we sell that product? Well, clearly we can. We still haven't done any offtake for South Asia, Southeast Asia, Europe, Oceania, including Australia and New Zealand. So there's still plenty of markets for the rest of that product to go into. So we're in a really good position now as we move obviously into financing to have all that, to have the offtakes in place.
You've said 70% is now binding. That must be a kind of almost a good step forward. How do you? This is a big project. It's 3,500 square kilometres. This is massive.
Yeah.
Where do you start, and where do you go along for? How do you manage such a big space, and how much are you doing to begin with, and how do you grow that?
Yeah. So. Look, it is a huge project, and the reason it's huge is we're actually extracting groundwater as our resource, right? So it's quite compared to rock, it's very low grade, but we take the water out, we pump it into large scale evaporation ponds, and about 90% of the volume that we take out evaporates into the sky, and we're left with the salt forming in the pond floors, and we then harvest that salt and about 3 million tonnes a year, and transfer that to the processing plant to refine it into sulphate of potash fertiliser. It'll be a finished product at the processing plant ready for application onto crops. So that's why the land area is so big. So we'll basically implement a trenching network 3 metres deep across the lake, dig the trenches, the groundwater seeps into the trenches, and then it's transferred along that trench network into the ponds. Processing plant will be on the edge of the salt lake, produce the potash. We'll have 12 road trains going each way each day. It's about 12 hours from Lake Mackay up to Wyndham Port, and we'll cart the potash up in those triple road trains to Wyndham Port. And then up at the port, we've got our own freehold land right on the waterfront, and so we'll put our own storage shed and ship loading facility up at the port. A lot of work's been going into the whole infrastructure chain from Lake Mackay. It's 900 kilometres up to Wyndham, so it's a lot of hard work to sort of put together all those pieces. But it's a bit of a differentiating factor for Agrimin to have the whole, I guess, mine to ship operation under our control. We're not saying goodbye to our potash at the mine gate and letting a contractor pick it up and cart it down to someone else's storage shed at the port and someone else will put on the ship. It's all controlled by Agrimin, so it's quite a unique opportunity.
Did you start to look at that right at the beginning, to have that control right up to the port, to getting on the ship? Was that always the case, or did that come along as you were looking at the bigger picture?
Yes, that's a really good point. No, probably for the first couple of years, we were planning to go down the more traditional contracting route, where a contractor would, experienced trucker would rock up and pick up the product, take it to someone else's port. And I think it sort of dawned on us around 2017, 2018, this is very much a bulk commodity type project. 50% of our operating costs and about 50% of our workforce was tied up outside of the mine gate in the logistics and the ship loading. So just to have that much of your operation sitting with a contractor we didn't think it was going to be feasible long term. There's also other issues we had, like a lot of the road trains that exist in WA were built to cart heavy mineral concentrates and iron ore, and potash is like a third of the density of those types of materials. So we worked out pretty quickly that you're going to need a different type of road train. the wagons would be bigger, longer, taller. And if we're now getting bespoke road trains, why would we pay for one contractor to have those road trains? Because we'd be in a lot of trouble if that relationship wasn't so good. And then so we really started to realise we needed to control the whole logistics chain. And once you get up to the port as well, given that fertiliser, is a bit of a, we need to have storage when customers call up and they go, we want, 1,000 tonnes, 5,000 tonnes. For Brazil, we need to have that ready to go. They might say we want some granular products to go to the US. We need to have that ready to go. So then we know we need to start to control our logistics up at the port as well. And so that was sort of the thought process, to come to controlling the whole logistics chain.
But is it scary numbers? Because it's a long way to get it from where the resource is up to the port. I think you said 900 kilometres.
Yeah.
Are there scary numbers in putting that infrastructure together, or are you going to get some support from the infrastructure funds to build that rail?
Yeah, look, when NAIF was created in 2016, that was an important part of the picture for us. So putting a lot of infrastructure in, and they gave us very early on an expression of interest to say that they would support us in that, in doing that. And then we've got obviously the Tanami Road, which the federal government's now allocated a lot of money to. So sealing that corridor was really important, because once it's sealed, that 900 kilometres can be achieved in, as I said, a 12-hour journey. So we can have, our truck drivers can leave site loaded at 6 in the morning and they get to Wyndham at 6 at night. They can have dinner, have a good sleep, wake up in the morning, leave 6 o'clock in the morning, get back down to the site, the next day. So it's a very sustainable operation, which is really important to us, as opposed to having sort of a FIFO workforce that's sleeping on the side of the road and driving at all sort of weird hours. So I think that's made the logistics easier. And the other thing is got to be remembered, when we leave Lake Mackay, we drive past one community at Yaga that might, basically no one lives there. Then we get to Balgo that has 1,000 people, get to Horse Creek that's got 5,000 people. Yeah, you might cross 3 or 4 cars all the way up to Wyndham, maybe a few cars along the Great Northern Highway as you head up to Wyndham. So, there's not many people out there. And we, I think we have, once we're driving up, we have to do a right turn onto the Great Northern Highway and a couple of turns to get into the port. That's it. It's pretty, it's pretty crazy to think that you can drive for 900 kilometres and it's so open.
So it's trucks from the resource all the way up to the port? Because I thought you said something about rail.
No, trucks all the way. Yeah.
Okay, so
might have said road trains. Yeah.
There we go. That was my mistake. Road trains, lots of trucks going up and down. Okay, so you've got the roads going in. That's sorted. You own the land up at the port. When are you going to start the construction up there?
So the port construction will probably start a lot later into the overall construction for the project. Purely because it's a lot quicker to do, and we have a 2.5-year construction time frame for the whole project, and the port construction is about 9 months. So that'll kick in sort of halfway through the general project construction. But yeah, so once all going well, we get our approvals this year, we get our funding package together, and we hit the road running early next year into construction. 2.5 years construction, and then after that it's a 40-year mine life defined on the top 3 metres of the resource.
All right, so from an investor's point of view, what I want to know is shovel ready, that's fine, but revenue-wise, we're talking what, 2020?
Yeah, late 2024.
Oh, late 2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, So, 2.5 years. Once we start construction, once we reach FID, start construction, 2.5 years, and we should be into first production.
All right, so it's all happening at the moment, and you've been very, very busy. So what I love to do, because we're running out of time, is what a story, Mark. By the way, I'm sitting here going, this is massive. This is and correct me if I'm wrong, is this the world's largest mineral resource of brine-hosted sulphate of potash? Is that correct?
Yes, we're the largest outside of Africa. So there's one project in Africa that's got a larger resource, but yeah, this is will be, and once in production, will be the second largest producer in the world.
Before I get into the final bit, I just need to ask this question. We talked a lot about the Americans and other places with the offtake agreements. What about our poor little farmers down here in Australia? Are they going to get access to it? Because hey, we got our farmers down here as well. Yeah,
look, the Australian market, we've kept 30% of the offtake and part of that was to make sure we've got product to service Australia. So no doubt, this is the most profitable market for us because we don't need to ship it anywhere, especially with shipping costs as high as they are. So it's a no-brainer to sell to Australia, and we'd love to sell as much as possible here. But it just hasn't been a focus because we've got 450,000 tonnes to sell, and the Australian market is about 50,000 tonnes today. The focus has really been on making sure we've got those international offtakes to support the project funding, and then we look forward to engaging with the Aussie farmers once we're up and going, and hopefully we can sell it to them a lot cheaper than they can get it from anywhere else.
Great story, Mark. Really interesting, and I'm looking forward to some of the news flow coming through. But tell me now, for my beautiful audience out there of investors, why they should be sitting up right now and taking notice of Agrimin. What's your market cap before you tell me that?
So we're capped at about $130 million today.
Okay.
I think we're at 47 cents.
So tell me why they should be sitting up and taking notice. Only three reasons.
Okay. Well, look, firstly, the food security thematic, I think, is really getting a lot more recognition now. People are understanding that, a third of the world's wheat exports come from Ukraine. And if that's not available for poorer and emerging countries, then they're going to have a real issue feeding the world. And I think that's going to be in the news headlines. It's going to be getting a lot more attention. And we've got skyrocketing potash prices as well because of the sanctions in Russia and Belarus. And so this, I'd say, as an agriculture, food, fertilizer thematic, this is where investors should be looking for the next couple of years. And if you're looking in that sector, secondly, I'd say Agrimin is the best pure play potash exposure you can find listed globally. I think, we've got a tier 1 asset, tier 1 mining jurisdiction, and we're just months away from being shovel ready after, as we've talked about, many years and a lot of money that's been spent to get to this point. And then thirdly, I spoke about the NPV of our project, $1 billion that we delivered on the back of the DFS. That was delivered at a $500 price. The price today for SOP is over $1,000. So, the value accretion for shareholders here is immense, and our job is to be disciplined and make sure that all of our shareholders get that that maximum benefit from all the value that we've been creating with this asset. So I think there's a lot of good news to come, and the best years are still well ahead of us at Agrimin. So I'm looking for lots of people to get on board with the journey.
Well, it's a great journey to be on, and as he just said, ladies and gentlemen, Agrimin, feeding the world, because guess what? If we're not getting fed, we can't do very much else with us, can we? Now, 130 mil market cap, and as Mark just said, the sulphate of potash price has gone from $500 a tonne when they did the DFS, and it's over 1,000 now, and there's a real supply shortage coming. So watch this space. As I said at the beginning, the ASX code is AMN. Mark Savich, CEO, well done, congratulations, and we'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps today.
Thank you very much for having me, Kerry.